August 12, 1942. Motor torpedo boat base, Tulagi Harbor, Solomon Islands. The radio operator transcribed the urgent message from Henderson Field. Japanese destroyer force detected proceeding southeast through the slot. Multiple vessels estimated arrival Iron Bottom Sound 020 hours. Lieutenant Hugh Robinson, one of the first PT boat commanders to arrive in the Solomon Islands, studied the reconnaissance report. 4 boats against an unknown number of Japanese destroyers, vessels that had dominated these waters since the war began. What none of them knew was that these 77-foot plywood boats were about to begin a campaign of nocturnal harassment that would force the Imperial Japanese Navy to fundamentally alter their supply operations in the Solomon Islands. The Japanese owned the night waters around Guadalcanal. Since the American landings in August 1942, Japanese destroyers had run supplies and reinforcements down the slot, the narrow passage through the central Solomons, with near impunity. American forces called these runs the Tokyo Express, and they had become the lifeline keeping Japanese forces on Guadalcanal alive. The Imperial Navy's superiority in night combat had been demonstrated catastrophically at Savo Island in August, where Japanese cruisers sank for Allied heavy cruisers in 32 minutes. Their Type 93 long-lance torpedoes could strike targets at 20,000 yards. Their crews had trained for years in night combat tactics. Their optical equipment and trained lookouts could spot enemies in near-total darkness where American radar often failed. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's strategy was straightforward. Control the night. Control the supply lines. Control the supply lines. Maintain the garrison. The Americans might own the daylight skies with their aircraft from Henderson Field, but darkness belonged to Japan. Without these nocturnal supply runs, the 30,000 Japanese troops on Guadalcanal would starve within weeks. The PT boat represented American industrial ingenuity, pushed to practical limits. Motor torpedo boat squadron 2 had arrived at Tulagi with the first boats in August 1942. Each Elko 77-foot boat displaced just 45 tons, length 77 feet, beam 20 feet, draft 5 feet, shallow enough to operate where destroyers couldn't follow. Lieutenant Roland Westholm commanded one of the early boats, examining his vessel's armament in the fading light. 2 twin 50-caliber machine gun turrets, for 21-inch torpedo tubes carrying Mark 8 torpedoes, weapons that suffered from a 50% failure rate due to defective magnetic detonators and depth running problems. The boats carried no radar initially, relying entirely on eyesight and sound for detection. But the PT boat's primary weapon was speed. 3 Packard 4M-5 1-cylinder engines, each generating 1,350 horsepower. Maximum speed 41 knots in calm seas, though 35 knots was more realistic in combat conditions. Japanese destroyers could manage 35 knots at best. In the confined waters around Guadalcanal, speed meant survival. The hull construction defied traditional shipbuilding. 2 layers of mahogany planking formed a flexible shell that could absorb impacts that would crack steel plates. The entire boat could be built in 2 months at a cost of $263,000. A destroyer required 18 months and cost $8 million. Motor machinists made first class. Eldon Senta had spent 8 months learning every sound the Packard engines could make. A mechanic from Detroit, who had worked on the Packard production line before enlisting. Genda could diagnose engine problems by sound alone in complete darkness. These engines are temperamental, Jen explained to new crew members. Wrong fuel mixture and you lose 200 horsepower. Let them overheat and you throw a rod. But treat them right and they'll give you speed when you need it most. Genta had modified the carburetor settings based on Solomon Islands humidity levels. He developed a pre-combat checklist that included warming engines to precise temperatures, adjusting ignition timing for maximum acceleration, and ensuring cooling systems could handle extended high-speed runs. His innovations would keep boats operational when manufacturer specifications said they should have failed. Commander Koshi Kaneda stood on the bridge of a Fubuki-class destroyer, leading 3 destroyers down the slot at 28 knots. 20 years in the Imperial Navy had taught him to read these waters. Every shadow might hide an enemy. Every phosphorescent trail could mark a torpedo track. Tonight's mission: deliver 800 drums of supplies to the garrison at Cape Spearin. The drums would be pushed overboard near the beach where soldiers would swim out to retrieve them. It was inefficient. Only 30% of supplies typically made it ashore, but it was safer than attempting conventional unloading under threat of air attack at dawn. The destroyer's main vulnerability was its size and inflexibility. At 388 feet long, the destroyer needed 800 yards to complete a full turn at speed. Her draft of 12 feet limited her to deep water channels. Her 5-in guns couldn't depress low enough to engage targets closer than 300 yards. Against small, fast targets at close range, the destroyer's advantages evaporated. October 13, 1942, 2,330 hours, 4 PT boats from Squadron to idled in the shadows of Savo Island. Engines muffled, running at minimum RPM to reduce noise and phosphorescent wake. No radio communication, only hand signals and shielded blinker lights. Lieutenant Lester Gamble in PT-48 led the patrol line. The boats spread out at 500 intervals, watching and listening. Without radar, they relied on what sailors called the Mark I eyeball, human vision adapted to darkness after hours without artificial light. At 2,347, lookouts spotted shadows against the horizon. 3 destroyers in column formation, making 25 knots toward Cape Spearin. The standard PT boat attack doctrine called for approaching from different angles to split enemy defensive fire, but with only 4 boats and unreliable torpedoes. Gamble chose concentration. All boats would attack from the destroyer's starboard quarter, fire torpedoes at 500 yards, then scatter at maximum speed. PT-48 led the approach, engines throttled to 1,500 RPM until reaching 1,000 yards. Then Gamble pushed the throttles forward. The boat leapt to 35 knots, closing rapidly on the last destroyer in line. At 500 yards, Gamble fired to torpedoes, angling them to lead the target by 30. The Mark 8 torpedoes left visible wakes of bubbles, immediately alerting Japanese lookouts. Garai, torpedoes. The destroyer's helmsman threw the wheel hard left. Both torpedoes passed astern, missing by less than 20 yards. Star shells burst overhead, illuminating the PT boats in harsh white light. 5-in guns opened fire, fountaining water around PT-48 as Gamble zigzagged violently at full throttle. PT-46 attacked next, closing to 400 yards before firing. 1 torpedo ran erratically and missed. The second suffered detonator failure, bouncing off the destroyer's hull without exploding, a problem that would plague PT boats throughout the war. The boats claimed possible hits, but Japanese records show all destroyers returned safely. However, the attacks forced the destroyers to jettison supplies prematurely with minimal amounts reaching shore. The first indication that PT boats could disrupt supply operations even without sinking ships. The disruption of October 13th convinced Admiral William Halsey to reinforce PT operations. By November 1942, 12 PT boats operated from Tulagi. Additional boats arrived with new tactics developed through hard experience. Intelligence revealed the Tokyo Express schedule, runs every 3 to 5 nights, weather permitting. 4 to 8 destroyers per run. Route predictable, down the slot around Savo Island to various beaches on Guadalcanal's north coast. Lieutenant Commander Thomas G. Warfield developed new tactical doctrine based on early encounters. PT boats would operate in sections of 3. One boat would fire torpedoes while the others created diversions with gunfire. When torpedoes missed, which happened at least 50% of the time, the guns would force destroyers to take evasive action, disrupting their supply drops. Following the surface action, where American cruisers were defeated by Japanese destroyers, PT boats became one element in the broader interdiction effort. While they couldn't match the firepower of destroyers, their harassment tactics forced changes in Japanese operations. PT boats patrolled the approaches to Cape Esperance, attacking supply destroyers when possible, though most torpedo attacks failed. The constant threat forced Japanese commanders to maintain high speed, zigzag continuously, and jettison supplies hastily. reducing delivery efficiency to under 20%. 11 Japanese destroyers approached Guadalcanal in the largest supply run to date. PT boats sorted to intercept but achieved limited success. The boats fired over 30 torpedoes without confirmed hits, illustrating the weapon's reliability problems. However, the psychological impact was significant. Japanese reports noted, enemy motor torpedo boats make operations extremely hazardous, must maintain constant evasive action. PT-59 achieved one of the few confirmed kills, sinking Japanese submarine The 3 as it attempted to deliver supplies. This demonstrated PT boats could be effective against slower, less maneuverable targets. Admiral Riso Tanaka, Japan's most skilled destroyer commander, personally led the next supply run. His flagship, the Nagasaki-class destroyer Teruzuki, equipped with the latest fire control systems and rapid-fire guns. 10 additional destroyers accompanied him, 6 carrying supplies and drums. At 2,315, PT boats from Squadron 2 detected the Japanese formation of Cape Esperance. Tanaka had anticipated PT boat attacks, stationing Teruzuki as rearguard while supply destroyers moved inshore. PT-37 under Lieutenant Lester Gamble, PT-40 under Lieutenant John Sears, and PT-48 coordinated their approach. This was the tactic they had refined over 2 months of combat: divide enemy attention, create confusion, exploit opportunities. At 2,323, one or more PT boats. Historical accounts vary between PT-37, PT-40, or PT-48, fired torpedoes at Teruzuki from approximately 500 yards. At least one Mark 8 torpedo struck Teruzuki's port quarter, detonating against the steering compartment. The explosion damaged Teruzuki's rudder and propeller shaft, reducing speed to 12 knots. Oil from ruptured fuel tanks caught fire, illuminating the destroyer for miles. Admiral Tanaka was injured in the explosion and temporarily relieved of command for medical treatment. Destroyer Naganami came alongside to evacuate Admiral Tanaka and wounded crew members. The rescue operation took 30 minutes, during which the entire Japanese formation milled in confusion. Supply destroyers jettisoned their drums prematurely. At 0440 on December 12, Teruzuki's depth charges detonated from the heat of fires, breaking the destroyer's back. She sank in 800 feet of water, becoming the largest Japanese warship definitively sunk by PT boats during World War II. The sinking of Teruzuki marked the peak of PT anti-destroyer operations, though PT boats would not sink another Japanese destroyer. Their cumulative impact as one element of the broader interdiction campaign was significant. Japanese records revealed the extent of disruption. Motor torpedo boats combined with air attacks and surface forces make night supply operations increasingly untenable. Delivery efficiency reduced below sustainable levels. Admiral Tanaka, after recovering from his injuries, continued to command, but noted, the enemy's motor torpedo boats, while rarely achieving hits, force constant evasive action that severely degrades our supply delivery capability. By January 1943, the Tokyo Express shifted to submarine and barge operations, methods even less efficient than destroyer runs. The combination of PT boat harassment, airstrikes, and surface actions had made destroyer operations unsustainable. The PTBO campaign demonstrated that naval warfare had entered a new paradigm where multiple weapon systems working together could neutralize traditional advantages. PT boats alone rarely sank major warships, but as part of a combined arms approach, they contributed to strategic victory. Production statistics revealed the industrial equation. The United States built 531 PT boats during World War II. Each boat required 2 months to build and cost 1/30th of a destroyer. Even with high loss rates, 69 boats lost from all causes, they provided cost-effective harassment capability. Training programs at the Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron's Training Center in Melville, Rhode Island, produced over 1,000 officers and 10,000 enlisted men. Each crew required just 8 weeks of training before deployment. By mid-1943, PT boats received radar sets allowing detection at 15 miles. The improved Mark 13 torpedo introduced in late 1943 increased reliability significantly. These improvements transformed PT boats into more effective combatants, though their primary role remained harassment and interdiction of smaller vessels. The Imperial Navy attempted various countermeasures with limited success. Destroyer escorts swept ahead of supply formations, but this divided their forces. Float planes dropped flares to illuminate PT boats, but this also revealed destroyer positions. The shift to submarine supply operations proved insufficient. Submarines could carry only 20 tons of supplies compared to 200 tons for destroyers. The garrison required 400 tons daily. Mathematical defeat was inevitable. The development of armored barges for coastal supply runs represented an adaptation to PT boat threats. These slower vessels became the primary targets for PT boats from 1943 onward, where the boats achieved their greatest success against maritime logistics. PT boat service attracted volunteers seeking action. Average age 22 years. Many had never been to sea before training. They learned navigation, mechanics, and combat through intensive preparation and harsh experience. Living conditions were primitive. No headstock crew used buckets, no galleys, cold rations only. No bunks, sleeping on deck when possible. Tropical diseases infected 80% of crews. Combat stress was intense with all crew exposed during action. Casualty rates reached 33% higher than any other naval service. Yet morale remained high. PT boat sailors knew they were elite volunteers taking extraordinary risks. They developed strong unit cohesion that transcended rank. Lieutenant John F. Kennedy's PT-109 represented both the hazards and heroism of PT boat service. On August 2, 1943, PT-109 collided with destroyer Amagiri during a confused night action. Kennedy's leadership in saving his crew became legendary, though the incident highlighted the extreme dangers PT boats faced against destroyers. The collision was not intentional ramming, but occurred in darkness when neither vessel detected the other until too late. 11 of 13 crew members survived, with Kennedy towing an injured sailor for hours to reach safety. The PTBO campaign revolutionized understanding of literal warfare and asymmetric naval operations. While PT boats sank relatively few major warships, one destroyer, one submarine, and numerous barges, their harassment value exceeded their direct combat achievements. Post-war analysis revealed PTBO's primary contribution was forcing Japanese forces to adopt increasingly inefficient supply methods. The progression from destroyers to submarines to barges represented tactical victory through attrition of logistics capability. Modern fast attack craft evolved from PT boat concepts. Small fast vessels using speed and surprise to engage larger opponents. The emphasis shifted from torpedoes to guided missiles, but the fundamental principle remained unchanged. In the waters around Guadalcanal, 77-feet plywood boats had proven that integrated naval operations could overcome traditional superiority. PT boats alone could not defeat the Tokyo Express, but combined with air power, submarines, and surface forces, they contributed to cumulative attrition that proved decisive. The Japanese Navy entered the war confident in night combat supremacy. They had not anticipated that American forces would employ multiple interdependent systems, each individually vulnerable but collectively overwhelming. Commander Tamachihara, who survived multiple PT boat encounters, wrote, "The PT boats taught us that modern war requires adaptation to unconventional threats. They rarely hit us, but they never let us rest." The final accounting was strategically significant despite limited tactical success. One destroyer definitively sunk, Teruzuki. One submarine sunk, I-3. Hundreds of supply runs disrupted. Thousands of tons of supplies lost to hasty jettisoning. The cumulative effect contributed to Japanese defeat at Guadalcanal. In Iron Bottom Sound, where so many ships rest on the ocean floor. The Teruzuki lies in 800 feet of water, the only major Japanese warship definitively sunk by PT boats. Her wreck, discovered in 2024, serves as a monument to the young men who fought in small wooden boats against steel warships, proving that courage and persistence could influence strategic outcomes even when tactical success remained limited. The Mosquito boats had demonstrated that future naval warfare would require integrated operations, technological adaptation, and recognition that even small combatants could contribute to strategic victory when employed as part of comprehensive campaigns.